more than one child that went home and asked and told their parent about a question that was personal on the test. Now, if my child came home and told me that, all right, I would go and talk to the principal of the school.
And what would you think?
Let it known to everybody, anybody that I knew in the school, parents, I would tell them about it.
And what do you think the principal would do?
Tell me to leave the school. This is not the school for you, because that's what they do today. Private and public schools, they will do that.
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
I taught second grade for 15 years. I have 4 grandchildren.
Yeah.
I could not help them with that Common Core math. I gave them the answer right away.
no, that is a
They're
big,
over there making
that's a big
squares.
problem all across the country. No, I understand that. And you're not going to get much help, but they're going to say, but we're teaching them to think critically and deeper, and they're being challenged. Now, I understand the need to challenge kids.
Absolutely.
Right, but how is any parent on his or her own going to argue with someone from the school administration who says...
We come together.
Well, it's a way of, to me, it's a way of taking it out of my hands as a parent.
Yeah.
I'm my child's first teacher.
You're right.
And they're taking that away from me.
Right, but most parents don't even come to meetings like this. You know, we've had poor attendance at PTA meetings for years before Common Core. Even in towns where you've got a lot of educated parents, I mean, I can tell you, I was in a PTO for 20 years because I have 5 children that went through the public schools there. But there were small numbers of people at every one of those meetings, all those years that I was active in a PTO. And I look at the information we get back. I have 3 grandchildren in the Newton public schools. So I asked my son and daughter-in-law to give me the printout from Park, because they take Park, because I wanted to see what information. I have it with me. And all it does is tell you how your child did in relation to the class, how the class did in relation to the school, how the schools did in relation to all the schools in the state. There's no instructional information that's useful to anybody on what you're getting for all of this. They weren't trying to be helpful to the teachers. They weren't provide, as far as I know, because I have this form I asked for to look at. And this is true everywhere in the country. I keep asking people, has anyone gotten any information back that a teacher has found useful? I once taught school. I would know what would be useful information on a kid. Nothing is useful. You don't need to know.
Was the MCAS information that came back, was that useful to the teacher?
Why that was useful is that you got the items. And you know the actual items your kids took. And if half your class got the examples, I say, on fractions wrong, then you knew you had something to teach or reteach, or you had to figure out why they all got fractions wrong.
Could I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so to answer your question, one of the things that we do at the beginning of every school year is we go back and look at those MCAS answers, and we try to pinpoint what trends we're seeing. It is really, actually, it's very useful data. And it's good teaching practice, and that kind of goes back to the point I was trying to make before about not homogenizing everything in front of you. You may find that a certain class has a very difficult time making inferences, say. That's something we usually find as a difficult item in English. So what do? We reteach, we take different approaches to try to say, okay, we're going to try to look at inferences in vocabulary, in nonfiction, in fiction, etc. And that is good information. It's localized, and it's the kids in front of us. Newton kids, maybe they don't have it. Maybe the class after the one I'm teaching may have another problem that we need to look at. And so really, it goes back to the idea. You're teaching the kids who are in front of you. You know, they're not automatons. You know, we're not teaching Cylons here. You know, there's no hive mind. We're trying to teach the kids who are in front of us.
Right. And the other thing that was useful about MCAS, because I was in the department at the time they did this, the writing that was collected, because there was a lot of writing every year, open responses. There were 4 open responses every year at grades tested. And the teachers would, for many years, it was our own English teachers that corrected these papers. they would choose examples of high, middle, low performance. And then they would put up these examples. So if you wanted to see at your grade level what a high paper in writing looked like, you could at least see for that particular question what good papers look like and what low papers look like and so forth. You can't do that with anything to do with Common Core. It's not available. So the PARC test items were useful in many ways to English teachers in particular, or math teachers. The MCAS, I'm sorry, the MCAS test items.
What I'm thinking about, I have a question to ask before I get to this, but one of the things I'm thinking about is how do we practically go from where we're at now, where they've been preparing for this Common Core for the last 5-7 years, and having kids prepare for several years, and all this money going, and now how do we switch it back? But I have a question. I'm thinking of Mr. Swayze. I don't know if you can help with this, but what I was told was the kids for several years, I have a couple of kids who graduated from Northridge High, actually, and I have a couple kids in Sutton Middle and High School. When they're in the younger grades and they're taking when they were taking the MCAS the classes that they tested in MCAS in the English, they were learning how to write a certain way. But once they got into the AP literature and what's the other one called?
Language and literature.
Language and literature, especially
Our composition.
was that it was taught differently. That they said, well, now you forget about what you learned with the MCAS stuff. This is now we're going to get into how to write this way. And so I guess I'm throwing out that MCAS, of course, we know isn't perfect. It's better than what we're seeing with Common Core. But what can we do now? I mean,
Well, that's the ballot question, really, because other than that, you're stuck with Common Core. You've got a Board of Ed and a governor and a Secretary of Ed who've decided that this is what you're going to do as a state. And if you as parents don't like it, lump it. I mean, you're stuck with it. You don't revise these standards because they're copyrighted, or the department will choose, as they're doing right now with the history and the other. They're setting up review committees of their own, because I follow this. They choose whoever they want, the teachers they want that will give them back warmed over Common Core. This is what's happened in many other states I've been involved in. And so a governor will order a review of Common Core standards, and so a review committee is set up, and it looks like it's going to really revise things. Even the legislature may say we've got to have a balance of parents on these committees, not just teachers and so on. And lo and behold, the standards end up being almost 90% Common Core to begin with. So there are games, and I know some of the games that are played, but that's not for the detail here. But that's what happens. It's very difficult to get rid of what some good Philadelphia lawyer worked out for the Gates Foundation and the USDE with the Race to the Top application. They locked, as well as they could, everybody into Common Core. The ballot question, as Donna said, a governor could issue an executive order if he so chose. The state legislature, if you could get enough people to do something, and there are some states that have tried, Ohio and North Dakota, I know, in particular, both their state legislatures have passed anti-Common Core bills, and then it ends up with a governor vetoing it. Kasich in Ohio said he would veto any anti-Common Core bill his legislature passed. So where do parents go? And yet the state reps hear more on Common Core from parents than on any other issue. I've been told that in many states. In North Dakota, they told the Commissioner of Ed, we want to get out of Common Core, and we're voting to get out of the Smarter Balance Consortium, which was the one they were in. But what does the commissioner do? She says, well, I'm going to be choosing, by law I can, the people to put on the committee, so they know that the committee is going to give back Common Core, even though the state legislature has said we don't want any more to do with
Common Core. Same thing and spend a lot of money getting there.
Yeah, and she will find teachers because even the Gates Foundation has given money to some organizations to promote Common Core standards. Idaho's Department of Education, it got $200,000 directly from the Gates Foundation. I don't want to just say it's all because of one foundation, but when one man has $60 billion, that's an awful lot to play with if you have peculiar ideas about, and you don't know how to get people who've done anything good in education. And I mean, we've gotten only people who don't know how to do anything effective in education that he hires. Every project he's been involved in has failed, but he's got $60 billion from Microsoft to play with. What can you do? I mean, this is a real question for democracy to answer. When you have one man with that kind of money who is a megalomaniac, I mean, he's got a Napoleonic complex. This is my way of describing him. What do you do with someone like that who spends his time in his 64,000 square foot home on his machine in the morning coming up with ideas for education? And he made his money in Microsoft, but he thinks that because he was a genius in Microsoft, everything he comes out with anywhere else is also a genius idea.
We've been talking now for all this time about testing, but what is missing is the kids are sent to school to unfold.
Right.
Okay? They don't have a chance to unfold because they're pushed into a direction and into a certain category.
That's right.
Instead of letting children develop as they go along.
You're absolutely right.
They go to college and people don't even know yet what they're going to major at. What is a 4-year-old going to know what its
he doesn't care. See, the problem is he doesn't care. The president doesn't care. Congress doesn't care. Who cares? Parents and teachers. But they don't have any role in changing this picture. And that's what you're facing.
Where do you
go?
I was just going to say, to follow up with what you were saying, that I think it would be easy to sink back into where we were before, because even though the MCAS did test certain aspects of our learning, I learned so many things that I was not tested on at MCAS, where with the Common Core, you have to literally teach every single word to every student.
This is called equity. You have to understand this is being done in the name of equity. You can't teach anyone anything if you don't teach everybody the same thing. So what do you do in the face of such a stupid philosophy?
There's a question over here for this young one.
Speak up, honey.
I have to say the reason I homeschooled was that school became so stressful for me that the reason I homeschooled was because school became stressful and I needed a break, but they wouldn't give me one.
Okay, you've mentioned one of the major solutions, which is homeschooling. Thank you for bringing that up. I went to a homeschooling conference in San Diego 3 weeks ago. I was asked to speak there. And I looked at the materials that are available to homeschoolers that are now available in catalogs as I went through the exhibit hall. There is everything available possible. They even have private schools which will have homeschool parents who sign up for 2 days a week for the subjects they need, and then 3 days a week they're home with their parents. But most parents don't know how to homeschool their own kids. But homeschooling is the only hope of the future that I can see, unless we get a Congress or a president that's willing to do something.
So in our community, I've heard teachers who are supportive of getting rid of Common Core. I've heard some administrators, but I know that our superintendent has pointed out we've been just invested lots of money and lots of time. So what practically speaking, now, every single community has always,
right.
Their taxes keep going up and up and up because of the school.
You're right. What can individual parents do?
I do want to get rid of the Common Core. I don't want the federal government to decide. I don't believe in, there isn't, equity is idea, but when you come to reality, everybody's an individual. We need to teach a child what they're capable of.
Of course, we would all agree.
As best as we can.
One solution, which is not an easy one, I used to do this because I was that kind of a mother myself with my 5 children in the Brookline public schools, but they heard from me all the time, and a squeaky wheel eventually gets oil. I mean, I was Mrs. Stotsky to a lot of people, and they didn't like Mrs. Stotsky, but Mrs. Stotsky would go right to the principal or to the assistant superintendent or the superintendent, never to the classroom teacher, because I never wanted to put the classroom teacher on the spot. But no, I had been a classroom teacher. I would always go to someone higher, and they heard from me all the time. And in order to shut me up, they had to do something. And all I can say is, just keep annoying them. That's why I think this Governor Herbert in Utah is finally asking for a review. He said he's so tired of hearing complaints from parents. I mean, this is what's going to make somebody move?
Could I jump in on that too?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I wanted to kind of go back to the what you were saying before about the different testing, and the young lady who, Olivia, very bravely got up and said that she was stressed out. And I wanted to just touch on a point, because I don't know if you've been noticing a pattern, but almost every question we've been talking about is based on testing. And I'll say I'm not the biggest fan of the MCAS, so there's some issues with that as far as I'm concerned, but it is a fairer test. But one of the things that we've gotten our kids used to for the past dozen or so years is routine testing. And unfortunately, what we see happening in a lot of districts is that testing begets more testing. So that you don't just end up with MCAS or PARC or whatever your district does, but then sometimes there'll be district testing that gets put in. And one thing we found, and this is just kind of the facts on the ground, we ended up we met with more success on MCAS when we started to align our individual assessments so that in 9 and 10, one of the main things that we do is our assessments are aligned with MCAS, we're an MCAS district, but so all of our writing, because you had asked about the AP writing versus like MCAS style writing, so most of our writing goes to one of the MCAS formats, but these kids are getting tested all the time in every single subject. We have lost so many days this year to various kinds of testing. And it is stressing kids out. A 4th grader should not be feeling the same kind of stress that a 35-year-old guy with a mortgage and,
I had one parent, a friend, whose son lost sleep for like 2 weeks before the test. She said he's not sleeping at night.
Yep.
And this happens every year before the test.
It does. And unfortunately, it's gotten routinized, and we're kind of numbing our kids to the fact. So they're just like, okay, well, I guess it's time for me to get my government test. And that is a dangerous precedent to set for a free society. I'm going to get on a libertarian soapbox, so I won't do that. But it is true. One of the things that we keep having to remind ourselves is what's at the center, the kids. Why are we there? I'm not in a skyscraper in Boston making $250,000 a year. I'm out here because I like teaching kids. I like high schoolers. I think it's a great age. It's an important age. Some of my colleagues love teaching 2nd graders, love teaching 5th graders, what have you. We're there because of the kids, and unfortunately, they are the biggest casualty. It's annoying for us. It's frustrating for us, but I could not imagine being a kid. I mean, I was fortunate enough that when I grew up in Connecticut, I came in at the very beginning of Connecticut mastery testing, so I never really was subject to it all that much, and then went to a private school. So for me, standardized testing was SATs, and that was really, and the GMATs, and that was about it. But to have students encountering standardized testing at almost every grade level, the freshmen we're so happy. Oh my gosh, there's no MCAS this year. Well, except for now bio at the end of her freshman year. So there's always this testing around the corner, and the kids really are stressed, and it does not make for a good learning environment. We have kids who are actively, kids have never liked going to school for hundreds of years, but they really start to despise it now. So.
We agreed early on in this conversation tonight, which was very well done, by the way, that the bottom line is the children. Our children are being so frustrated, so unmotivated, being dumbed down, right? I have an idea. Why don't we get millions of children writing letters to the governor and asking the governor to come and do their homework? Because they don't understand that it's their future.
And insert a
That is the
worksheet
bottom
in
line
that.
now. That will be a tremendous effect on everybody. I think Congress would stand still. You see, millions of children being frustrated about what Common Core is doing to them. Is that an idea?
That's a great idea. That's what we could bring to when we do our signature
Maybe
collecting
sounds
for the
great.
ballot. And we can just leave them out. Yeah, that's a fantastic idea.
We can send them their homework then.
Let's get these children to articulate and to express how they're feeling and what their frustrations are. Because those people out there, listen, I've been hearing about dumbing us down for 20 years. There's a conspiracy out there to undermine the educational system in this country. If the terrorists wanted to do something to bring this country down, the best way to do it is to go to the kids and destroy our educational system. I'm suspicious of that.
Because they're our future.
Yes, absolutely. You don't have to have weapons to destroy America. Just get in there and destroy the parents, the families, and the children in the educational system.
I always say, if you
This is coming
want to
in.
take down the world, just write out your plan in cursive, because no kids are gonna see it.
That's true.
You know what? I just
That's
want
great.
to, I want to say really kind of interesting, I just came from the other forum, and one of the women there is a signature collector, and so someone came up to her the other day at the fair and challenged her. I love Common Core, I love Common Core, and I love the way they do the math. She says, okay, let's bring it on. She took she did it the old way. She said, you do it your way, and let's see what happens. So she took a 3-digit subtraction. So Sherry did it within, I don't know, 3 seconds or something. It took the other woman a little over a minute, and the other woman did not get the right answer. So she said to her, well, you don't get the right answer. She said, it doesn't matter. What? And that's an adult that said that to her. As long as you explain how you
Just
got
look
it.
at credit.
Process that matters.
So what you want to do is,
If it's your change.
she told her, bring it on, bring it on. And she challenged her right there and then. I'll do it my way, you do it your way, and we'll see who gets the answer.
47.
quickest. So, I mean, this is what it's really interesting that people are supporting it to the extent that they know it's insane.
Is she a teacher, that woman?
No, she's not a teacher. I don't know. Oh, the one that challenged her. You know what? I don't know what she was. Probably administrator. But the interesting thing is, Sandy, I don't know if you mentioned, there's no empirical evidence that Common Core works. Nothing. Is there empirical evidence that the math standards work? Yes.
45.
So we have proven
Our own.
standards with empirical evidence that say it works, and we have Common Core, which doesn't make any sense, standards that there is no empirical evidence. So how crazy are people? They're crazy.
And there's a whole generation of kids who are
The
getting
sales
these
job.
tests, and they're the ones that
Right.
are
Right.
We had our my daughter's fourth grade teacher as a parent, at the beginning of the year, they have the parents go in and the teachers talk about the class and what's going to happen.
PTOs, the
And
parent-teacher
the teacher said,
conference.
now I don't want you to worry because, we're going to do a lot of math this year, and I don't want you to worry because by the end of the year, they're going to be doing math the way that you know it. And I said, why are you spending an entire year? Like, I would hope my kids would be progressing, but you're spending an entire year teaching them so that at the end, they know how to do it at the beginning. Like, it didn't make sense to me. Yeah, that she's spending it. Yeah, but for a whole year, they're going to teach them this
Another
so that they can do it the quick way at the end of the year. Like,
If she didn't recognize how foolish she sounded.
It didn't sound foolish. Yeah.
We have a question over there.
I wanted to offer a little bit of a different perspective because I have been against Common Core for quite some time now. But I also think it's really important to be inclusive so that more people come and join and feel comfortable. And I think there's a lot of anger and things behind it. And for instance, myself, when it first came out, I was excited because I read the standards and I do math differently. Probably the way Bill Gates does math because I read the math, it made complete sense. And when I was in middle school, now called the normal way. And I couldn't do it. It took forever.
Number 48.
I was like, why do I have to do it this way? My brain worked a little bit differently. So at first I was excited when I initially, like the first day, read it, and then I realized I was the only person in my class that did math that way, and I'm just going to pick that one standard because my brain does work a little bit differently. And that was really, I'm not going to say traumatic, but it was a really harsh experience for me because I loved learning and I loved going to school until I started meeting that wall that says, no, you can't do it the way your brain works. You have to learn this other way. You have to show me you're doing it this other way. It doesn't matter if you get the answer right. It's how you're doing it, which made no sense to me. And now I feel like that is happening to the majority of the population of kids. So it's not, to me personally, so much about whether the standards have any value or reflect the way people think. Because some people might feel like that's a natural fit, and some people will not feel like that's a natural fit. And I understand I'm in the minority, and it's never okay, in my view, to force any child to say, or an adult for that matter, and say, you have to think my way. It's against all the tenets of our country. It's against everything that I think we should stand for. It wasn't okay when it was sent to me, and that was a long, long time ago. You know, and the fact that the majority of my classmates would have had that experience, I can't imagine, because I loved math. I was I was good at it. And then I stopped. I refused to do any work. For some time I ended up in private school. So, you know, it's
But
kind
what
of
you seem to be saying is that there are different ways to get to the end
Right.
product. And I don't think that's being denied by anyone. But one of the issues, is there a correct answer in a math problem? And any mathematician will tell you there is only one correct answer to a mathematical problem. And you do need to teach kids how to get to the one correct answer. Whatever process they end up using, if it works, is fine. But if they don't get to the right answer, there is a serious problem. The airplane may collapse, the train may go off the tracks. I mean, there are real-world
I agree with
consequences.
that.
So that's the issue that's being raised
Yeah.
by mathematicians.
yes.
There is
Yes,
an
I agree
answer,
with that. Yes,
and
there is
it's
an
not
answer.
just like any answer will do because there's no correct answer.
I guess what I'm trying to highlight is that in the world outside of here, when I talk to people, other parents who are not here,
They have
about-
different processes and different ways of thinking about it.
Right, and they say, oh, it's about the math, it's about
44.
the stupid math and this and that, and I think that
That's fine.
and that it is a problem for sure, but it's about much larger issues. It's about
But I don't think-
capitalism being involved in our education system. It's about obviously PhD, educator, legislator, whatever people.
It isn't, I
Not
don't
making
think anyone
decisions
wants
on
every
politics.
kid to learn only one way to answer a problem. The question is that the end result has to be the right result. And so at some point, you've got to say, we are interested in the process you use, but if the process you are using is getting you to the wrong answer, that's not going to fly in engineering. You've got to come up with the right answer.
I think if she's so talented in math, some people are, and it's fine. But why don't we teach the method that we know is giving results, and then set aside some time for
To teach all-
mathematical gymnastics for kids so they can learn some other ways of getting to a point. But why do we destroy the mathematical system
Right.
that has proven through ages? I mean, I grew up with a slide ruler, you know, we didn't have anything else. And concerning, like,
Number 52.
like history, when I finally came from East Germany to the West and we went into a boarding school, we had a lady, a teacher that came from America, and she was teaching English and she was also teaching history. And she came in one day in our class. She had 3 books about the French Revolution. Each book was written from different aspects. She put the books there. She said, okay, we're forming 3 groups, and you read this book, you read that book, and you read this book. You read it, discuss it with yourself, and then we all meet and we discuss it all together and see what ideas, what we understood about the history. And that was education. But working for tests and gaining no knowledge and no skills to research and do anything is sickening.
So I don't know whether parents feel that what can parents do? This is the question that was raised.
Wait, just one quick question because I think it's important. You mentioned about opting out of the PARCC test. So my big question is, what are the ramifications if any, to opt out? And what does that mean if you opted out? Because
there shouldn't be any ramifications unless your local school committee.
I did that for my child. You opted out. It's called refuse the test. I did my little research online, and so I wrote a letter and told we're in this middle school, Mr. Goya, that my child was going to refusing the test, and I told him why. And so then my child, during the testing, went to the library and spent 2.5 hours maybe.
They allowed your child to go to the library.
What?
They allowed your child to go to the
library. They allowed him to go to the library.
That's part of the.
Your child could be kept in the classroom as long as whatever they're doing is not going to interfere with the testing. But they have the room in the library. They also had some testing being done in the library as well.
Oh.
He went in the library and he read. He could do homework if he wanted to.
They have to provide an instructional setting that is appropriate by law. Mitchell Chester has said that actually in one of his bulletins. If you opt your child out, and you have the right to do so, you don't need permission, you have the right to do so, the school system should provide, because there were horror stories of kids being forced to stare at a computer or being put into a closet or being sent out to a playground to run around. I mean, who knows whether these were all true or not, but these were horror stories that circulated on the social media. But you do have a right to say that you want an instructional setting for your child, and your local school committee is responsible for telling your superintendent, this is what you tell your staff to do. They're in charge. That's why we elect them.
So we do, but you can just go to the principal versus you have to go to the school committee and bring it up.
No, you better go to the school committee, because the school committee is going to have to show a little spine on this. It has the authority because it was elected. That's why they're elected to office. They are in charge of the local schools, whether or not they believe this or not. I mean, they may think the superintendent's in charge, but they are. I mean, this goes back 400 years. Every state, it's the same way, whether you were a territory or a colony. The locally elected school committee is in charge of policy. Not the USED and not the State Department of Ed or the state board. Your local school committee decides what are the consequences if your kid misses homework, doesn't pass in the homework. What is the homework policy? It's not up to the principal or the superintendent to just make up one on his or her own. The local school committee can decide. That's their statutory authority if they wish to do so. You want to speak up?
When I was opted out of PARCC, I sat in the classroom and read the book for the whole time because I wasn't allowed to have anything in the classroom.
But you could read a book of your choice?
Yes.
Okay. You weren't given any book to read. You were allowed to read a book of your choice. I mean, there are humane administrators.
Yeah. The one thing that you might want to look into, and I'll be honest, I don't know this answer myself, but as far as MCAS testing goes at the high school level, my understanding is that you need a a passing grade, which is a needs improvement, on your biology, English, and mathematics to graduate from high school. So that may become an issue.
Right.
So
you shouldn't opt out of one of those
Right.
tests if you want a high school diploma.
Diploma,
That's
right,
the
yeah.
idea.
Yeah, grade 10,
Not
grade 10
not grade
is
10.
state.
Grade 10 is the one that
right.
Right.
you're supposed to opt out.
You could opt out if you want to, but
Yep.
then you may not be able to get a high school
Right.
diploma.
Yep.
But
So
3 through 8, you're pretty good at doing that. And if you
Pleasure
go
meeting
to,
you.
okay,
If you
bye-bye.
guys go to commoncoreforum.org, we have
Yeah.
a form. You need to say refuse the test, not opt out, because they will not accept the opt out term. Yeah, you have to say refuse the test.
And they will try to make you come to the
It's like
school.
And
Yeah.
they will
Refuse
pull all
sex
sorts of things.
standards
That
that
person
you
come
don't
back
like
and
or
say, you
whatever.
can't, blah, blah,
Day
blah,
trip
that
to
kind of stuff.
someplace.
You push back and say, it is my parental right. There are things documents online that will show you that it is your right. Once you push back a second time, they will then probably say, have your kid come with a book.
If you look under opt-out, I think you'll find there are some forms that several legal outfits, a Pacific Legal Institute in California has made them available, and then there's some other groups
There's
that,
a bunch. If you look at ones that are specifically
Yeah.
opt-out, Massachusetts,
they will
I
show
don't
you
know
what
the name
this,
of the organization, but you can email them.
49?
Google opt-out and it'll take you.
Yeah, but Massachusetts, and then they'll tell you exactly how you, very simple form. Just fill it out and say, hey, my kid's not gonna take it, and I expect them to be given something else to do. But expect your principal to come back with a form thing of why you can't.
Yeah. You don't ask permission. I saw the opt-out form when I spoke in Palos Verdes in California, and they were passing it out. And it was very simple. My child's name is so-and-so and will not be taking this test. And I want my child placed in an appropriate room or something like that for the period of the test. And that's it. You sign your name, and that's all. And you make a copy of what you send in so that there's no question. And sometimes there are games played, I've been told, with not receiving, supposedly, and the child is told to go and take the test. Or there are other things that are done too, but you keep a copy of whatever you send to the school, and you contact one of these pro bono lawyers that works for one of these law firms, and they quickly let the school system know if they have violated the law.
Sometimes you can just, all you really need to say is it's my right, it's the law, right? They back off. It's the same thing with like when you're submitting an education plan
Right.
for homeschooling. You can submit A, B, and C, and that's really all you need, and they can say, well, you need this, but no, not really. By law, in Massachusetts, this is all I need, and they're like, okay. I'll
Yeah.
talk to you at the end of the year.
They're going to
Thanks.
try to intimidate.
Yeah.
They've been told to do that.
I would like to offer a little bit of a silver lining. Sir, you had mentioned, maybe having mass movements of students. I can tell you just my personal experience that this past year we had some district testing that was put in the past couple of years, and we actually had some students kind of do a little bit of Irish democracy and basically tank the test on purpose. They told, they said, we're just not going to do it, or if you have us do it, I'm just not going to try. And so I think there are some rumblings amongst the students themselves, and obviously it's not going to happen at the lower grades independently, but as they get into the high school level, they've now been subjected to so much testing for so long, and the more you put on, and even Obama a few months ago had, I forget, it was an open letter or it was a speech basically urging districts to scale back on the testing. So if you even have the president opining in that way, and then you have at the grassroots level parents, and I know in Uxbridge there were students who were sent home with.
Yeah, that was an 8th grade student. He
Yep.
went around and
He-
found out that he could opt out.
Yep.
He went around and handed out flyers to everybody.
So I do think there is some hope. I think there is some pushback from the grassroots level amongst the kids, and that again is a good sign. That's a very good sign.
Administrators don't want trouble. I mean, to be a good administrator, they want to keep things calm, and if they want to move on to a new job, they don't want any controversy being attached as part of their baggage. So they're going to try to keep things quiet.
That's the problem with Congress. We're going through something right now in this country where the country's been asleep. Congress has been asleep. They just sit back and it's all about money and it's about power. We have to change that. This is not anything different than an American Revolution that started back in the days when we had in Boston and in Worcester, by the way, in the beginnings of the American Revolution. It has to go on. Even Jefferson said we need to continue the revolution every 20 years. We're going to get into this mess that we're in now. There is something going on. And the word conspiracy, equity, that's a
Number 66.
equity. Why don't they go to North Korea? They get equity. Why don't they go to Communist China? And all these other countries.
59.
There. So we're going to be very careful. We can't emphasize enough on the urgency of what we're doing here now. One idea is to get the children maybe to articulate and let them be spontaneous in expressing how they're feeling and what's going on.
66.
As they try to figure out this common core, because there's nothing like you said. We're very fortunate to have somebody here like her to articulate what's really happening and how the dynamics are and all that. I learned a lot about that.
Thank you all for
Number
coming.
60.
I think you probably